Ready to call the meeting to order. It is Keizer Community Diversity Engagement Committee, and today is Thursday, April 4th, 2024. All right, let's go approval of minutes. Did everyone have a chance to review? We had quite a few meetings last month, but the agenda from our March 7th meeting, any edits to it? I have one tiny one, Dawn, on page 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, fifth paragraph. If you could correct my last name, that would be awesome. Perfect. Although I am kicking it, but I'm Rodick, not rock kick. So, any other edits or no? Do I have a second to a motion to?
I make a motion to approve the minutes with the change of the name.
Second.
Second that.
Okay. I guess we should also call roll, huh, Dawn? I'm going all out of order. You're going to call roll on all who is here? Okay. Tammy?
Here.
Jill?
Not here yet.
Stephanie?
Here.
Carrie? Here. Benita?
Here.
Shaney?
Here.
Nevaeh?
Here.
And Councilor Reed is excused. She mentioned she's at McNary. All right. So we have interested citizens. Anybody would like to come and? Oh, I need to ask for a vote. I'm new. Oh, okay. All those in favor of passing the minutes, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Yeah, I'm trying to get you out of here at 7. So now you gave me. I know. No, can't skip. So we can then move to, if we don't have any interested citizens, the volunteer appreciation. Daisy Hickman.
Hi. So I am from the Volunteer Coordinating Committee, and April is Volunteer Appreciation Month. And all of Keizer's committees pretty much are volunteer. Our council's volunteer, our mayor's volunteer. It's one of our 3 pillars, pride, spirit, and volunteerism. But we want to thank you for all of your hard work in what you're doing. We really appreciate everything that you guys do. It's really important that the entire community is heard in government, and this committee is a huge part of making sure that that happens. And we really appreciate you all months of the year, but April is the one that gets dedicated for it. So Dawn was supposed to have some treats for me to pass around.
They're on the back.
Okay, so I'll come up and do that. Look, they've got like something that's not horribly chips instead of just cookies. I haven't waitressed in so many years. I'm terrible at it. Oh, you even found trail mix.
There's
So
one
that's
in
like
there, yeah.
completely not horrible.
There's
No, there's another one in there
There's
too.
another one in there.
If you want one, I'm good.
Are you sure?
Yep. I just brushed my teeth right before. Thank you so much, Daisy. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Oh, come on. All right, so I think with that, we can move to the next one, which we have an awesome guest, Ms. Lisa Brown, who's joining us from via Zoom. Lisa, would you mind introducing yourself?
Absolutely. Can you all hear me well?
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. So I'm Lisa Brown. I'm an Equity and Civil Rights Program Manager at the Oregon Department of Transportation. I'm happy to be here and talk to you all about our social equity lens.
So Lisa,
Okay for me to dive in?
please. Yeah, please dive in.
Awesome. All right, I'm going to share my screen because I have a little PowerPoint put together just to kind of walk us through that. So if you all can let me know by like a thumbs up when you see my screen. Awesome. So thanks so much for having me here today. So our social equity lens kind of helps us to focus and prioritize kind of our longer range goals while also thinking about how we, interact on a day-to-day basis. So prioritization is really like that first step. These are kind of our priority areas that we're focusing our equity lens in. So policies, processes, and procedures that promote a diverse workforce, partnership with businesses that are owned by BIPOC women and others who have been currently or historically marginalized. Also, how we're looking at our, projects, programs, and the prioritization of social equity and those planning and then the risk assessments there. And then also our, conversations with communities, how we're engaging voices across our communities as we, and hearing those viewpoints to encourage and influence our decision-making at ODOT. And then also, making sure that we're considering, transportation investments in neighborhoods that have experienced past harm by our decisions. And then lastly, thinking about those industry partners that are held accountable, for aligning with ODOT's commitments to equity. So thinking about as we partner with folks, who we engage as consultants or contractors, how they also need to carry our perspective forward on equity too. Oops, I went too far. So also thinking about a social equity lens as offered in our action plan for the state of Oregon. Having that lens allows us to move towards impact with a metered and intentional sense of urgency, transparency, and accountability. It also asks us to, it also helps us to ask ourselves some questions and interrupts bias, pivot longstanding institutional patterns, informs resource allocation, and evaluates our investments. Where are we spending our dollars, and who are we engaging, and how are we learning about what communities who exist within the community demographics that are there to make sure that they're influencing and supporting and helping guide our decisions and actions as well. Also, getting into that a little bit more deeply, it's like, what's the decision? What is influencing that decision? How? Who's being considered? What are the assumptions about the root cause of a problem we're seeking to solve? What data or info is available and being used to think about or think through that problem and possible solutions? What is the benefit and burden distribution across communities? Is there a way to lessen that burden? Is there a way to increase the quality of life for communities vulnerable to disparity that may not be directly linked to the solution we're pursuing? How are we extending the timeline and budget to account for that equity? So these are some of the things we're thinking about as we're doing this. But and using an equity lens can be both in our small daily actions and our big ones. So things that I think about in using an equity lens are if I'm thinking on the small scale, I'm thinking about, did I, when I was in a meeting today, be sure to ask for everyone's and invite everyone's perspective into that process? That would be a smaller thing. But some of our larger things would be expanding DMV language by adding kiosks that offer more services in other languages that are spoken in a community. A smaller thing, again, might be bathroom signs where we're saying all genders welcome, right? A bigger thing, again, is how are we investing our money and what are we looking at to do that? So I want to share too a little bit about our social equity index map, because I think that'll be helpful in this conversation too. I'm going to actually bring that up onto the screen now.
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
How are you making sure that how are you making sure that you're held accountable to this line of thought? Because when I read this, it kind of reminds me of something I was working on in my AP language class today, where we have questions we're supposed to ask ourselves. But when I write an essay, it doesn't mean I necessarily am constantly asking myself those questions. So do you actively have a conversation, including these questions, every single time an issue is being brought up, or is it just something you're meant to think about? Like, what does it look like in action?
No, it is something we actually need to take action on and implement into our processes, but also it should be in the mental framework of our employees on a daily basis as they're interacting with others, but also thinking about the more intentional plans. How are we doing that? So I'll give you an example of something that I'm working on right now. So right now we're in the process of developing our state transportation infrastructure project, list for the 27-30 cycle. And within that, we're building equity into the process so that we are thinking through that every time we are assessing like which projects move forward, how we're spending our funding. So it's really both that like, am I doing it in my daily work in the bigger and smaller interactions, but like also how are we holding ourselves accountable within our plans and actions that we take, across investing funds, across contracting, across the products that we, make available to the public and those type of interactions. So it's both in, our regular daily interactions as well as our strategic planning. Does that help?
Thank you. Yes, thank you.
I'm going to keep going on the presentation. So a little bit about ODOT social equity lens. We have 4 questions that we ask ourselves. So have or will historically excluded communities be informed, consulted, or involved in our processes and our selections of things that we do? What methods or tools were used for the engagement? Being specific about that. So we've created like an equitable community engagement guide that helps our workforce, regardless of whether they're DMV or commerce and compliance or folks who are building and designing bridges or whatever their work is at ODOT, they have a way to think through and implement an equity lens into their process using that engagement toolkit. Also, in what ways does it address the needs expressed by historically excluded communities? So that engagement toolkit helps walk folks through like the thought process of engaging folks, and also it gives us an opportunity to think at what level are we engaging folks. Thinking about what's called an IAP2 model of engagement, which is 5 levels of engagement, informing folks, maybe like a postcard they get sent in the mail, here's what we're doing, right? That's not the level we want to live at for most of our things. So it's inform, consult, involve, collaborate, and empower communities. So those are kind of the 5 levels. And so how are we more often getting beyond that informed level, engaging voices, listening to, and then leveraging that feedback in our decisions? So that would be those higher levels of collaboration and empowerment. And then also, does it affect a high social equity index area? And this ties into the social equity index map that I was talking about. So it's a map of GIS or like U.S. Census data is literally built into the structure of that map. And also we built in things that are important to considering equity as well. So we've built into there where, there's been what are our numbers of fatalities in that area of roadway, what are our number of serious injuries, and more. So the demographic data contained within that for census data is like, race and ethnicity, limited English proficiency, socioeconomic disparity, gender, people who experience a disability, and more. So so we can see that come forward on a map, and we can learn about a community and have some data-driven decisions to learn about which communities do we need to ensure that we engage with, because census data tells us this is who's in that community. That helps us to better connect, reach out, and build rapport and relationships with all the people within our community. So I said I was going to share that map. Let me grab that.
Just as you were getting that map, the model you mentioned, Lisa, it's in one of the documents that Tammy provided. It's on the Clackamas County, the IAP too. So
it's a little bit quiet, but what I heard was is maybe you wanted to see also the engagement guide toolkit.
that would be good. Maybe not right now, but if you could send that to us, that would be lovely. That sounds like a great framework to borrow or benchmark from, what they call, right? Copy. It's called benchmarking.
Yeah. So essentially, this is the index map that I wanted to share. And when I left click, I can see that block group data. And I can, size it to different data that I'm looking to see. So here, let me do that.
Yeah. I think we use the same model at the city, the Argus, right?
Am I hearing that you also have like a disparity map as well?
I don't know if it's a disparity, but we use the same, the ArcGIS system.
Nice. Okay. So the darker the areas on the map, the higher the disparity is based on some of those categories, and also, like I mentioned, like crash fatality data or serious injury data. So this helps as we use this map currently to plan into how we're investing funds, right? So we're looking at, as we're scoping a project, we go and then we go, here are the projects that are proposed, whether that's through our advisory committees on transportation or other folks that are, as we're looking at work that we know we need to do. So we'll give some scoring, and one of the scoring areas is it in a high disparity area? What also components would have an equity impact, benefit or burden? How can we minimize those, et cetera? So those are some things that we're looking at as we're using the social equity lens that's built into our process. And then also, lastly, I'm thinking too about this bullet number 4. Is there an opportunity in our work to increase safety and or access to historically excluded communities that are not directly addressed by the project's purpose? Thinking a bit deeper, these words are often used and sometimes interchangeably used, but they don't have to be confusing. As an agency, we're focusing on historically excluded communities as defined above, but in context, the communities and of concern and that makes sense too. So when we talk specifically about communities, what we mean is what we need to do is make sense of how that relates to, the impact of our transportation system. So how are we, taking care of folks who have been historically excluded, communities that have been systemically discriminated against or excluded from transportation planning and decision making. And then also thinking through who that is, people with disabilities, people over the age of 65, people living in poverty or socioeconomic, and people who have limited English proficiency, as well as people who experience racial or gender marginalization. People who are in all of those categories are folks we're thinking about as we're looking to fairly engage across all of our communities and making sure that we are doing that within our plans and that those folks influence our decisions. So thinking about in what ways does this address the needs expressed by historically excluded communities? What are those benefits and burdens? Each question is one that helps us assist us in digging deeper, an invitation to assess, examine data, engage and plan, implement and measure success. These are questions that, are examples of how we could use the social equity lens as the beginning, which is how the lens is meant to be used as a way to start the conversation, to start the way we're thinking about do our work. So thinking about that, assess, examine, engage and plan, implement, and then measure success. That was what I had for the PowerPoint presentation today, but I did want to also share the engagement toolkit a bit with you all. So I did also bring that up on the screen. So this is our community engagement guide, and it specifically helps inform the way we do community engagement. So intentionally setting purpose and outcomes in the beginning as we're developing, designing, and implementing projects throughout the life cycle of projects, whether that's again across all the different types of work we do at ODOT. So identifying that purpose, who do we engage? Also, it's using our equitable engagement compensation program as well. That's one tool that we use to compensate community members for their participation in engagement with us. And then secondarily on the screen, you may see that the social equity index map, like learning about who the demographics of our communities are. That's something that we're, that I mentioned and showed you the map for as well. Using those equity lens questions before the project begins, during the project process, as we continue on. And then identifying those primary interested parties, secondary interested parties, and other key interested parties in the process. So community members, local public officials, et cetera. The list goes on. And then thinking about when I was talking about that IEP2 level of determining that level of engagement, what does informing look like? What does consulting look like? What does involvement look like? What does it look like to collaborate and empower folks? So helping folks who work at ODOT to think through what we mean by these things, how we're meeting our public promise in doing those things. And then we have this in our toolkit as well, where we are saying, like, well, what meets the criteria to inform, consult, involve, et cetera? Like, what hits those categories, so we can then clearly map out in our process what is hitting those areas, what effort did we do for us to track, measure, and ensure that we're keeping ourselves accountable, if that makes sense. And then, data collection before and after, research that may be done in advance, collecting information along the way from interested parties, and then analyzing data after projects are complete. Also, it means developing evaluation tools that are meaningful and help hold us accountable, help hold us responsible for collaborating, being inclusive, thinking about sustainability, and being open and transparent as we engage with folks. And a big part of community engagement, of course, and using equity lens in our work is also reporting back and staying connected. So, recognizing that we have some trust to earn with community. And part of the way we do that is not just by, coming and visiting a community once when we have a need, or we have an opportunity for them to participate in, something we're working on that we hope benefits the community, but also how are we staying connected and sustaining those relationships? That's really important too. And then the last several pages of our guide goes into some resources, some tangible resources for folks using the toolkit. So some things for them to think through, but also some resources on how you might facilitate a meeting with inclusivity, things like that. But also thinking about common barriers to participation. So thinking through the elements of, that government organization structure and function can be intimidating to some folks who may not have participated in that level of a civic engagement process before. And so how are we thinking about that and creating really a most welcoming space? How are we equipping folks to participate with us? I don't know about City of Keizer, but I do know that ODOT uses a lot of acronyms. So how are we maybe if we're engaging with folks or serving on advisory committees or we're collaborating with them, do we have a list of our acronyms even to help people to more comfortably know what's going on as we're using acronyms in our conversations? Is there someone that, maybe partners with them early on in their collaborative civic engagement with us to help them be briefed on all the things that are, pertinent to the discussion, the project we're working on, et cetera? Thinking about our implicit bias, use of government jargon, inclusive language, and so much more. So all these things are kind of covered in our community engagement, toolkit plan, if you will. And then I mentioned facilitating for equity and inclusion. So paraphrasing, making sure all voices are included, tracking the conversation, balancing, having, intentional time to think outside the box, et cetera. So those are all listed here. This is something I can share with City of Keizer if there's interest for that.
Absolutely.
Share the document. And
Hearing lots of nods and
okay.
yes.
And then lastly, it's kind of then tracking, like, for all the things we did, how are we collecting that data? And then, creating those, having those mechanisms for data collection so that as we look back and reflect, there's that possibility of reflecting how lens, how our equity tools, how those helped us to have tangible outcomes that were beneficial to the community and that they had voice and weighing in on those things. And then there's just some like sample agenda and stuff like that. So I'll stop my screen. And yeah, if you all had any questions, thoughts you wanted to share, happy to dive into that conversation.
Stephanie? No?
I don't have any questions.
Anybody? We're just in awe. We're just loving that you spent the time to present this with us because we're at a time where we need this. We need the equity. The mayor asked us to develop what an equity lenses might look like for Keizer, and we are in this moment of how do we continue engagement and do it in a more programmatic and systematic way. And so this is really, really awesome. So I'm going to do one of these because that's usually what I do when we do stuff right on Zoom because we can't always clap. So we just thank you so, so much, especially at 6 o'clock in the evening when I'm sure you have a full-time job. So thank you so much for your time and sharing your talent and resources with us. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to be here. As you have follow-up questions, are looking for that support, happy to, reach out to me. Happy to, continue to provide that.
I have a question.
Yep.
Thank you so much, Lisa. And how long did it take you or a committee to develop this wonderful program?
So, like anything, it usually goes through a lot of eyes and ears, looking at and reflecting upon what's put together. So it wasn't just one person's effort. It was definitely a collective effort across our Office of Social Equity team, our Office of Equity and Civil Rights team, as well as other folks across the agency. And then also I would say, there's always the next iteration, right? Create something, and then you learn lessons, and you go, oh, we could tweak that, or this would be more useful for folks, or how can we enhance that? So I will say I think it took one of my colleagues about a year to put together the Equitable Engagement Guide, because that wasn't the only part of their job. And then also the Social Equity Index map, we relied on some of our really skilled GIS folks. That's not my talent. I don't have that type of talent, but they do, and I was thankful to leverage that. But there are other tools that are similar, like there's the Justice 40 map or other things you can do to learn about, demographics, U.S. Census, quick facts, and things like that. And then, so yeah, I would say at least a year to put together some of these tools. And a collective effort.
Okay, thank you.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Lisa. We won't take any more of your time. Thank you again for coming and presenting to us. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks so much. I hope you all have a wonderful evening.
Thank you. You too.
Take care.
All right, moving on to committee member reports. Tammy. Thank you, Dawn.
Thank you, Dawn. I didn't really do a normal report this time. I sent in a bunch of data for us to cover and to look at to help us develop that framework. Other than that, the only thing I have is the Kinder Quest. It's in English on one side, Spanish on the other. Information that was shared, and I believe Dawn sent that to everybody.
So I think one of the things in looking and preparing for the meeting that I reviewed, I really love some of those programs, and she just mentioned the IAP too, which I think was on the Clackamas County model. So what I would like us to do, if it's okay, is review it and then come prepare in the next meeting and see what are the things that you liked about the engagement model. Because one of our action items that I think is in this agenda, I'm hoping, oh goodness, it was the items from the mayor that she wanted us to work on, right? And so that engagement with the neighborhoods is one of the things that she wanted us to focus on. So I really like the frameworks in the community engagement model of outwards and then inwards. So what do we bring to inform? What do we bring to consult? What do we bring to collaborate? So I think we need that. And maybe I'm mistaken, but I don't think we have had that before programmatically, systematically. This is how we do it. And so I think reviewing it and writing and establishing it for ourselves, like what are some of the things that we bring to the neighborhood associations that we want input on? What are some of the things that we bring that we want to inform them of and make sure that they know, and then maybe bring back over here some concerns. So it's a little bit of that two-way flow, if that's all right for folks to review and then come back. The other thing I have, and maybe I'm going out of order, so I'm sorry, Dawn, but I was looking at a whole bunch of the different agendas for the other committees, and I really love the park ones had a division of each member I guess each member is responsible for 2 parks, and they go and provide a report. So what I'd like to propose here, and maybe we can figure this out in between meetings, is I would love for us to go to a few of the neighborhood association meetings and have it designated. So I know that you do and that you love, and I appreciate that, but I don't think that's fair that you are the only one that gets to do that. Time and effort and all of it, right? I know you're probably going to still be there, but I think it would be good if we took, yes, Navia.
I just want to say it's something I've been thinking about, right? I went to the meeting last time, and I've been, reflecting on everything. And although I love the idea of having assignments for specific neighborhood associations, I feel like a lot of times they have been screaming and begging and crying for us to go to these meetings. And I feel like it's best if we all attempt to go to all the meetings. I understand that, you guys are busy, I'm busy, I have tennis and job, you're on the council, but if we all try to just like, hey, I have a free night, this meeting's going on this night, we should all be going. We should all be listening to their opinions, because what I might hear going to the West Keizer Association meeting might not be what somebody else hears, because I have a different perspective than you guys. And I just feel like instead of treating these as assignments, we should all be wanting to hear what they say. It's a privilege to be able to attend any of these meetings and be hearing the voices of Keizer. And I want to hear the voices, so it's not an assignment for me, it's a passion. And I feel like that's something, instead of just assigning it, we should all be attempting to go. When we have the time, of course, not explicitly.
Yes, please.
We come up to the mic.
There we go. I'm Chris Adams, and I'm a member of the West Keizer Neighborhood Association. And I know from my personal perspective, and I think I could probably speak for the association board members, is that I would be thoroughly excited to see you guys come to one of our meetings. I think it would be important for our associations to take up this whole idea. I don't remember it being brought up at our association meetings. And we have a diverse part of society of Keizer in our neighborhoods. And so I just wanted to point that out, that I just think it'd be a great idea.
Awesome.
And that's it.
Thank you. I really like your idea. I would like to have some more systemic, like this is at least one person will go. So while that might be good for everybody to go, I think having this, okay, at least one person will be there, because life happens, right? So I think maybe we can decide who and where and all of them. So we can start implementing that next month. Yes, Councilor Starr.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think there will have to be some flexibility because, right now you have Southeast Keizer Neighborhood Association is meeting at the same time as this committee. So I think if we're going to do that assignment, maybe some flexibility and somebody not being marked as absent or not attending or coming and then reporting, just kind of having some flexibility. And then just to make sure my understanding is correct, Chris, your association assigns people as well to come to the different committee meetings, right? So to model what they're doing, they have somebody from their association that attends parks, that attends traffic safety, that attends planning, is attending here. So, and they're all board members. So just wanted to give a shout out to Wes Keizer for that.
And again, it could be one of the things we use when Lisa sends us the model for engagement. One of the suggestions, so I'm coming up to the thing I told you, remind me. One of the things that I was brainstorming, and I don't know if it's feasible, but I mentioned it to Adam, Tim, is the mayor asked us to engage more with the neighborhood associations and do it in a way that isn't the same way we've always done it because of how busy we are, and we don't always look at print, and we don't always, get emails or this or that. So my suggestion, and again, this is a seed, this is a brainstorming. I asked Adam if the city has this emergency preparedness plan, and as part of such, it has cell phone numbers for everybody that lives in Keizer. So if there was an earthquake tomorrow, we could all get a notification at the same time. They are divided by neighborhoods. And so, and the people who have opted to be in this list have requested to get more communication from the city more often, not just once. So maybe that is one avenue, and we don't need to disclose names, right? I don't need to know, but if I have a list of phone numbers, maybe the association can have that list and send out notifications when there are projects that will impact that neighborhood to say, hey, we might have a new sidewalk, we need your input, send that as a mass email or text message, right? Because that is one form of communicating that will get most folks because you pay attention to it. So just again, one suggestion, one way of thinking it differently.
I think that would work if when we're looking at engagement and diverse engagement, not just one group, when you opt to be in that text, how is that communication being out and promoting, saying, hey, do you want to sign up for these texts? Mm-hmm. Because it just only hits one section again and not the rest that we're trying to engage into the community.
Yeah. I think part of might be word of mouth, but again, we got to start somewhere.
Running back to what we were talking about earlier, I understand putting off assignments until next meeting, but maybe could Tammy email us all, Tammy or Dawn, email us all the meeting dates for this next month of neighborhood association meetings, so if we're able to attend, we can. Because last time I only went to that meeting because they put up the board right next to McNary, and I saw it, and I was like, hey.
It's on their website, but it's confusing.
But not everybody looks at websites.
Dawn, would you mind doing that since you have everybody's contact all out in one spot?
So I only did it because I saw the board and I was like, hey, I'm not doing anything this week. I'll go.
You're thinking.
Mm-hmm. Give me a minute.
Okay.
Just go back.
All right. So does that work if we have assigned meetings to go? And then we can decide next meeting, or at least start working, because we have a laundry list of homework to do that we need to act on. But that might become, what things do we bring that we want input? What things do we bring to inform? What things we bring that we want to bring back here, right? So are they hearing, certain things or certain engagement or feedback that we need? So, okay.
And I think that's going back to Lisa's presentation. One of the beautiful items that they have in that program is resources, and one of them is how to conduct yourself in meetings or attend those meetings, and what does that language look like. So I think we need to really focus on creating that for us. So as we start engaging with community, we are being careful, and we are representing City of Keizer, especially community diversity and engagement group, that we all have that understanding. So I know we have like so many things we want to do, and we want to attend all these meetings, and we want to, and we should, but I do feel like we do need to have a little bit more structure with our team first before we start going out, because you make a bigger impact when you're ready to engage than when you're not ready to engage and you're just showing up. So intent versus impact, yeah.
Okay. So can we meet halfway where we can start attending it to just observe, see what's going on, understand the communities better, show who we are, say who we are, but we don't know what capacities we can impact quite yet until we've done that model.
I think it's up to the rest too.
Okay. Carrie?
I've been thinking.
Okay. Okay. Well,
Okay, so I would say that if we attend one of those meetings for the first time, I can foresee some observation from our part, and I think that it would be good for us as a group to develop some goals, and as to what we can offer to these neighborhood groups from us. And I can think of, for example, they might have some preconceived ideas about what this committee is about. So it would be good for them to ask us questions so that some of those preconceived ideas, they may be erroneous, they may be correct, but at least I can foresee some interchange of information, and I think that's where you build relationships and trust. Because if we show up to these committees, they're gonna wonder, why we are there, and if we're trying to impose DEI, philosophies to their closed group. Because right now, as I think that I've mentioned this before to this committee and to some individuals, there are some controversies out there facing DEI philosophies. And I think that we need to be prepared to present a positive image of what DEI is all about, so that people are not scared, and they will become more supportive. So those are a few of my thoughts that are running through my head right now.
thank you. Thank you.
Oh, do you want to go first?
No, you can.
I was just going to say two different things. One, although I do understand that would be a concern, because as I think Shani was the only one who was here when we did our survey, what was it, a couple years ago now, there was definitely some responses that showed that we were not well favored. Some very interesting responses that we had the privilege of reading about their opinions about our Community Diversity and Engagement Committee. But as far as I've told, can see so far, is a lot of the neighborhood associations are very welcoming towards us, and in fact are just they're very excited. When I went, I got an email immediately after about how happy she was to see me there. Not even from Tammy, it was from one of the board members. So I think that won't be too big of a problem that we'll run into, as the community of Keizer is over all very welcoming towards us as a group and can see we don't come from a place of harm, although it should still be something on our radar because there's, of course, always the view. And then the second thing is when going to these meetings, one of my concerns is that, of course, this is a very important part of Keizer, but it's not demonstrative of our whole community, and they do still tend to lean towards a certain demographic of older people who, of course, would go to these neighborhood association meetings, tending to be, certain demographic. And so while we should still take their opinions with happiness, with joy, we should still also remember that they're not the only people who matter and that not everybody is at these meetings, not every type of person is at the meetings. So their concerns, although once again should be taken very seriously, should also be kept in mind that only a minority of people attend these meetings.
Very well said. Yes. Ms.
So
Cross.
since I've never been to a neighborhood meeting, do they have an agenda and maybe we could let them know we would be there so they wouldn't be surprised when we all just show up?
They do have an agenda, and they give time to, at least the one I went to, they give time for you to introduce yourself and where you're from or what you do. So I introduced myself as one of our members. And then you're allowed to speak at the end if you wish about anything you heard or anything you want to bring to the table. That was at least the West Keizer Neighborhood Association. I've only been to that one. But you can also email, and if there's something you want to say, you can also be like, hey, I want to come and talk about this. And once again, they welcome it with grace. It's really impressive. They're very sweet people.
Dawn, we all send you our agendas, correct? No?
I will say one of the other reasons I thought about this was I read I don't know when you brought this, Tammy. I don't know if it was for the March 11th or March 7th meeting, but there was a feedback in there that many are saying that we do a lot of talking, which we do, but that action is needed. So I think that would be a step in the right direction, being seen, being there, being present, boots on the ground. So
I also have a project I'm working on currently to revamp the skate park, which is action and not talking. It's going interesting.
very cool. So I'm going to move us on to the next one, if that's all right, which was the new business. I'm not even going to talk about the equity agreement because I know you sent it, Stephanie, and we've reviewed it, and it was part of the presentation today. But part of the things that the mayor asked us to do was review the scope for possible changes. And I know we're not going to accomplish it all tonight because it's 4 big things. Consider what it means or looks like to engage with other boards, commissions, committees, and neighborhood associations, which is what we're talking about now. I think the piece that we haven't addressed is how we work with the other committees, but we can definitely tackle that next time. And again, welcome to attend any of the meetings and see any of the agendas and see if there are things that we would like to be more prominent about. And then schedule a consultation with the neighborhood associations based on the feedback they had received. Again, I think that depends on us attending the meetings. And then the most important one is what an equity lens would look like, which I think it's part of that community engagement model, right? If I have an equity lenses, I know the right questions to ask when we get into these neighborhood associations. Who is impacted by this decision? Who is not here that we haven't heard from? Who is negatively impacted by these are the questions. If we have a set of questions and we know what to ask, I think that's half the battle.
I agree.
Did we discuss agenda item 9A? Or did we skip over that?
No, we did. You know why we skipped it? Because I'm looking at page 2 of the agenda. See, that's my problem. Thank you, Nevaeh. Thanks for keeping me in track. Y'all.
I knew Carrie was wondering
Yes.
about it.
So, and maybe this is one we can tackle. We have 8 minutes. Well, we have longer, but we have 8 minutes with Councilor Starr in here. Do we want to tackle that one? Just have the discussion as to if we should be appointing members to the CDEC.
I would be willing to start with that.
Okay.
We've heard from Carrie. We know what your wants. I would, after some thought and reflection and talking with some community members, I do believe it is time to have them appoint us instead of the council, as I've kind of heard some opinions that it's...
I have been very vocal about it.
A couple others as well. Just that I feel like it's time to have the volunteer coordinating committee appoint members instead of the council. Although Star's making faces like she's thinking she's about to say something.
Yeah, it would be good to hear from all of us as to
Yes.
what our thoughts are, not just Nevaeh and mine.
I've actually talked to a few people about that because I wanted to know what people in the community thought. And the thought process that came to mind was people have come out for committees and not been chosen for whatever purpose. And Daisy does a great job at it. I have sat before her more than once and probably will again. But they like knowing that we are appointed by our counselors, that we are a little bit more accountable because of that aspect, and that we have them to lean on. Should we get stuck, we can call and say, hey, any idea of the right way to handle this? Or is there something I should be doing that I'm not doing? That kind of thing. I like the aspect of the volunteer committee being part of that process. I'm just not sure all our people are ready for that yet.
Stephanie?
So I guess, so I'm thinking outside the box, that maybe we could have a combination of that, the council still appointing, and then we do have members of the community who are really interested and passionate about this, go to the volunteer committee, and they can choose whether or not they join it. You know,
I like
that's
that.
where I'm at with that.
Daisy, you want to come to the mic again?
Sorry, Daisy.
No. I'm speaking as just private citizen. One of the things that I think is good about being appointed by the city council is that this committee has the capacity to have some very critical social and legal ramifications. And so I think that it's kind of like a Senate versus legislative sort of situation, and that it is a good idea to have a little bit of that oversight. I also, and again, this is me speaking as a private citizen, I want to be very, very clear about that. The faces that I am seeing up at the dais now are not generally the faces that I see coming before the Volunteer Coordinating Committee. I think that that is really, really important that we have some different faces, particularly on this committee. I think that it's probably a good idea to have, maybe we have one or two committee or just straight volunteers who are not necessarily appointed, so that people who don't feel like they're represented now, or people who have issues with the committee as it stands, they have then, okay, you have your opportunity then to be heard, in addition to coming to an open committee, which they oftentimes don't do. But I truly believe in the Volunteer Coordinating Committee, and this is not anything about that, but we only have the people who come before us to look at, whereas the counselors are able to go and target and say, hey, Benita, this is something I'd like you to be, doing. And I don't have that necessarily, as the Volunteer Coordinating Committee. We just have whomever comes to us. So that's my 2 cents on that.
Thank you for your perspective, Daisy. Thank you for your perspective.
Yep.
I appreciate it.
Any other questions?
Go ahead.
So, I just want to make sure everybody's aware that the Volunteer Coordinating Council is appointed by the city council. By each of the, so each of the city councilors appoints a representative on the VCC. And when that councilor's term is done or they're no longer on the city council, then the new councilor that replaces them gets to appoint a new member. So I just wanted to make sure everybody was aware that that's how the VCC is made up. I want to make sure that I share my understanding of, and then I'm going to be late for my date. It's my anniversary, so we're going to dinner. So when I was appointed to the council, one of the first things that I was asked to do was to select my appointee to this committee. And what my understanding was that when the council created this committee, it was created, and it's in the charter and the ordinance, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Wood, but that they made the appointment, but they also asked for people that if they were interested, they could send in letters of interest, right? So not an application. They could send in letters of interest, and they could then follow up with people if they were interested in having a further conversation. So there wasn't necessarily an application process, but people could express interest, and they were not. When I got the information, I was not required to make my selection from those letters of interest. I actually made my initial selection based on, and I don't know if anybody remembers, but it was somebody who was also applying to be appointed to council, but had to remove his application to do that. But it was David Rosiles. And he spent a year on this committee, maybe a little more than a year. So there was an initial pool of people that expressed interest, but it wasn't that requirement, and it wasn't an application process. Did I make sure and capture that correctly? Mm-hmm. Okay. So I just wanted to make sure those two things were explained on the record and people understood how that process worked.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Now up to your anniversary date.
Yeah, go. Go. You're excused.
We don't want you anymore.
I have a couple of feelings about this, and I don't know, so I'm just going to brainstorm out loud. I think the counselor appointing and recommending it here, it can be good, but it's also a matter of connections and access and who you know, which I don't love. Because again, we're not being equitable. If you don't know that person, if you don't have connections, how do you get to impact your community? And so that's one issue I have. The other piece I have with potentially just bringing anybody that applies, which is the other side, right? I think we have gotten, and we're not there yet, but we've gotten to a place where we have a common understanding of terms and concepts, and it's almost like you have a curriculum that you have to take, read, invest before you can effectively sit here and help with some of these things. And so my concern is if we just bring someone without vetting, without doing an interview process, without understanding where they're at, that we might have to spend some time educating that person and bringing them up to speed so that we can do the work. So that's my concern. And that won't be solved either by whomever the counselors appoint, because they're not going to take a quiz and take that person and say, let me vet you through. So I think there's a combination of we should also, maybe there's someone appointed and we confirm or not, and I don't know if we are giving that power, but it's a little bit of is this a good fit? Is this a good, and is that the strengths or the the knowledge and the things that we need in the community. So if we need, like, maybe we needed someone with a legal background, maybe we need someone with a financial background, maybe we need, you know what I'm saying, from that diversity of thought. So
I have a
again,
question about one part of what you said.
Sure.
In the politest way possible. What do you think is going to happen next year? Because I leave next November, and you're going to have a whole new youth member. I came in my sophomore year. I didn't understand any of the terminology. I didn't understand anything of what I was going on. And so, in my view, this committee is the place where people learn that. When I came in, I learned it amongst my peers. I learned everything amongst my peers. Everybody was learning it at the same time as me.
Yeah.
So I was never at a deficit behind any of these people.
Yeah.
And so next year, you're going to have a new member who does not know anything, won't even know what's going on this sheet of paper. So how are you going to handle that? And even more so, if we're saying we shouldn't have people coming on with a deficit of knowledge, is that truly diversity? If we're saying, hey, you don't understand quite as well as some other people in the community, so we should go with the people who know more, when this is supposed to be a committee of the community. Like, it's supposed to be, like, to me, I've always seen this as a committee where the average person could be up here. Somebody who came in, didn't know anything, had no background and experience in government and committees and anything, they could walk in and, like Tammy, be sitting at the table a year later. So I feel like that's not a barrier that should even be thought of when thinking about this committee. This committee should be open to anybody in our community. And it will be next year when my spot's open.
Yeah.
I see that as a huge asset for us.
Okay.
Because bringing new people in allows us to learn from their perspectives. If you had told me 2 years ago I'd been up here, I'd have said, You told me 2 years ago I'd be standing in front of her or sitting in front of her more than once. I'd have said no. I like my quiet spot in the back. Just so happens I'm really good at what we do. I'm really good at the engagement piece. And engagement is on multitude of levels. I go to all of the meetings because I enjoy engaging with everybody there. Whether I represent the neighborhood association, community diversity engagement, it doesn't matter. What matters is we show up.
Yeah.
That's the piece everybody's looking for. It's not that we belong to this committee. It's the engagement piece.
Yep.
It's if I have a question, like for Southeast Keizer, how do they get people in the seats? How can they reach the population that Ken can't understand and talk to? He doesn't have a translator. With Ken, I told him just use your phone, Google Docs. You can translate it through Google Translation. I've done it. I just created my first Ukrainian one, which I was really impressed with, just so that I can talk to my neighbor and say, hey, we're here. Now I have to keep it on Google Translation when I'm engaging, so he can talk to my phone and she can talk to my phone, and then it tells me what they're saying. Yeah. And it allows us to break that barrier. I don't think that the lack of knowledge is a barrier. I think people not wanting to learn is more of a barrier.
But I do think although I see the perspective and where you're coming from, I think there's a two-piecer here. So, and we might be understanding it in a different level or a different way. But what I see is the Community Diversity Engagement Committee needs to take action, right? So as a group, we must take action. So if we want to take action, when we bring people on board, there's got to be some baseline knowledge so that we can continue with the progress of action.
I agree.
Because from what I hear, and I've only been here for a year, or I don't know if a year yet, but from what I hear is that we have been going on this for a while, that rotation, and we haven't made progress because of that. Because we're like restart. It's a restart. It's a restart. It's a restart. And you can only go so many restarts before this doesn't work anymore, and we are away. We're no longer a committee. So it's not about you must pass a knowledge test, but you must have an idea, a foundation of what it is. And like you said, what if I get replaced? We hope that we replace, or that someone replaces you with the same courage that you have and with the same mindset of learning and expressing that you have. So it's not necessarily that someone needs to come in with a baseline of your knowledge. Someone needs to come in with some sort of idea of what diversity and inclusion is, and then take it from there so that they can replace, your shoes will not be filled easily. Period. But it's someone that will have some basic knowledge so that we can take an action, because the action piece is what we're lacking as a committee.
Yep.
And if we keep going in this direction, again, we're not going to be in movement. We're going to continue to be still.
And let me clarify just a little bit. I think what I'm saying, knowledge, it isn't a test, and it isn't like, with the youth, I'm not worried, because you're not questioning why we should use pronouns. Right? It's that kind of stuff that I don't want us having someone in here who comes in and doesn't understand those things, or who thinks that we don't see color and uses that as the, like, you know what I'm saying? Those are just some of these are foundational things, so that we don't keep spinning our wheels on whether or not that has merit or whether or not that's important. Like that's the piece we're moving forward, because we've all have that understanding that we want and expect that minimum of, yes, you're not going to question the use of pronouns because that's how people want to be referred to, communicated to. That's the platinum rule, right? So those are some of the things. And I worry if we just get someone appointed, if maybe we will get someone who might be a detractor, honestly, who might be someone who's like, I don't believe in this, so I'm going to be in this committee to undo it.
I have 2 comments, one for Benita and one for Thais. First off, Bring it. First off, I feel like our high turnover rate is what has really contributed to us restarting, because to me, looking at all of you, you all are the new people. To me, I'm like, this is the second wave of people. Although Stephanie and Thais, you're kind of like the third wave of people, where
all right,
Tammy and Benita are the second wave. And so to me, that's really what our you're on. What our problem has been is we've had 2 separate times where we basically replaced the whole committee except for me, Reed, and Counselor Starr. And then to Thais, I hate to say this, right? I would almost argue that if we did get somebody like this in the room, it's not necessarily a bad thing, because part of diversity isn't just people who are colored, who use different pronouns. It's not just that. It's also the people who disagree, because that is part of our community, is people who are like, no, this committee is stupid. Although most likely they wouldn't be trying to get on this committee if they did believe that. But that is still part of diversity. Part of diverse thought is the opposing viewpoint. And I've always been raised with the idea that everybody's viewpoint is worth hearing, even if it's the complete opposite of mine. And they have just as much of equal voice and equal, like, I want to hear them just as much as I want to hear anybody else in this city. I want to hear what they think. I want to hear how they feel. I want to know what they think we need to be doing just as much as anybody else, because they're still human. And even though I completely disagree with them, like, oh my God, stay away from me in my personal life, they have been, like, there's a reason they have this school of thought, and either we help educate them and help teach them, but we're not going to do that by being like, hey, you shouldn't be here because you think that way. We're going to help teach them by saying, here's why I don't think that way, but I understand where you're coming from, and I can trace it back to why you think it that way. That's how we're going to change views. It's not going to be like, stay out of this room, don't come, don't be on the committee. It's going to be by inviting them in.
It's not changing rebuttal. Here we go. It's not changing. It's not changing. It's not opposing a change of perspective. We want diversity. I mean, like that's a diverse group. That's exactly, and I can guarantee you, all of us don't think exactly alike, right? So it's not about not having or not wanting someone that is opposing our view. It's the knowledge that they bring when they oppose the view, and how do we execute that so that it actually makes it so that it's an impact. So we're not just reacting, we're impacting, right? So it's a two separate thing. We welcome, I mean, anyone that has some sort of knowledge, basic knowledge of diversity, welcome. Because diversity doesn't mean only one way. A diversity, I agree with diversity. No, it might be that I have trainings or I'm aware of it and I am opposed. And I would love someone to come in that way. But it is the action piece that we need to be that I feel like I need concern, because the reason why we are having turnover is because of lack of action. If we don't have action, we're going to continue with this cycle of turnover, and we're not going to make progress. And as a group, I mean, I am to that point where it's like we must do something as a committee for the community, because it's an hour that we spend, it's a time that we come in, it's a time that we spend reading that takes or makes me feel like it's not going anywhere. We need to start making that wave. Although we have a list of things that we have accomplished, that list of accomplishment, although it's great and it's appreciated, it's very small to what we can do if we collaborate, if we are all under the same page, or not same page, but we're all kind of in that progress of we need to take action. We understand we can sit here and we can read and we can take information and we can take it and implement it immediately with the community. And engaging is a big piece of it. And that means going out there and being able to expose ourselves and represent Keizer at a level that needs to be represented, right, as a public servant. So you just got to think about all of that. And I feel like there's got to be a minimal knowledge of understanding of community diversity and engagement, or just diversity in general. I think there's got to be a small basic understanding if we want to start taking action. If not, we're going to be on this cycle again. Yep. And we're going to be talking about we should take action.
Yes. No, we're doing
and we're not going to be doing action.
We're doing it. We're visiting the neighborhoods. We're getting input and bringing it back. And so maybe that's the other piece, right? Maybe that's the piece that if they come forward in front of the volunteer coordinating committee, would they be good ambassadors, right? Because we're sending them into the community. Is that a requisite? Is that a consideration to be not just a diversity, right, and diversity of thought? And would they be good ambassadors? Are they good in terms of, would we want them in the room, right? Would they be welcomed? And would they represent the city well? So.
Would you like to come forward and speak?
Yeah. Sorry. Just sit over there.
So what I saw earlier with the presentation is that you're wanting to develop a plan for how to formalize looking through other lenses and such. The concerns that you have are about, somebody coming in and understanding like the basic diversities. You're absolutely right that we are for a lot of our community at the very, very basics. The youth is way ahead. And
agree.
And, so a lot of the people who are coming in, it might be reasonable to, it sounds like this committee is one of homework anyway. And it might be reasonable to give a new committee member some homework of, some basic diversity, that once you develop that document of how to look through different lenses and such, that might be something to do. So that's going to hopefully resolve some of that. Also, once you get that, I think you're going to start seeing that is going to snowball, because that was through the social lens. There's a whole bunch of other lenses, and those then just require little tweaks. But it's really, really important to have that specifically written out, and that's where you're going to get your action. And that's where you're going to be able to then, once you have that, then you'll be able to go and present that to the neighborhood associations and say, hey, because neighborhood associations have the same problem that all the committees have of you have the same 5 people who are showing up all the time. And we've got a neighborhood of 100 households or however many, I'm making up these numbers. But, you know, how do you target making sure that we look like what we look like? And so I think that if you can get that started, that is going to resolve a lot of these other issues. And absolutely, I mean, we're working on how we're doing things at VCC. We're formalizing a lot more because history. But if there are things that, you know, if it comes to that, if there are things that you are looking for, then, you know, telling the VCC, hey, we've got an opening, we need a grant writer, you know, or we need, that way there can be some targeting that is, like you said, useful. And I had something else to say, but I'm sure I've forgotten it.
Well, and I think the lens is not just so that we have structure. It's and I think Lisa mentioned it in her presentation earlier. All of the processes that ODOT creates and training are based on this equity lens. So that means that from the top, it goes from the top all the way to the bottom. They look through it through this lens, right? Equity lens. That means City of Keizer will be able to, any decisions that is made, including appointing, will look through it through that lens. What is it that we're looking for? So it's not just an equity lens that we can utilize. This is an equity lens that we are arming the city with so that every decision that is made, whether you are in parks and recreation, wherever you are at, you're taking this in consideration and saying, who does it affect? Who are the people that will be impacted? So that lens is really important. It's crucial for every decision that is made in the city of Keizer. So we go beyond. It's not just for us. It's for the whole city and every committee that comes along.
But you guys would be the ones that would need to present it.
Correct.
And that's, again, that's where that action comes.
Yes.
So if you can get that foundation done, and what were we calling it, benchmarking instead of plagiarizing? You know,
That's a nice term, is when you borrow the things that you like from other people, it's called benchmarking.
yeah. So, I mean, with the benchmarking of it, even if you get like started, maybe not the full, you know, all gone through legal and everything like that, this is what we're going to want to do. Start having the city committees start thinking about things that way. And like VCC, it's super important for us to be thinking about that. Who's on, you know, traffic safety and bikeways? Who's not being heard? You know, is it, I can tell you from my walking that, you know, and they're talking about taking out some of the sidewalks. And I'm like, dude, I need that sidewalk for my walks at night. You know, who's not being heard? All of that type of stuff. I think that in a very short amount of time, you can have a very basic framework that you can then start doing the outreach and doing the action that people can see as you're developing this very big one. But I think that is also going to solve your then question of whether or not to have VCC do it or the city council. Oh, I do know what I was going to do. So what is your guys' term? And is there like a...
It's a 2-year term? Yeah.
And is it like
Mine's a
with...
4-year.
Okay. And is it like the VCC or where it's tied to the counselor who appointed you? Okay.
Okay. I like to add a couple things. So I'll take myself as an example. So I was appointed by Councilor Herrera. So when he departed the council, I was still on this committee. And so the person that replaced Councilor Herrera was Zoraida. So she asked me if I would continue. And so that's how, at the end of my 2-year term, I was able to continue. And so that's how that happens. And I wasn't one of the original ones, but I was one of the people who had sent in a letter of interest. And truthfully, I saw each one of those letters that were submitted to the council, and I was superbly impressed by the letters and from the people that had submitted an interest. I have a couple of concerns. I was originally pretty gung-ho about having the volunteer committee be more involved in the selection of members of this committee. But I don't know how many are in your committee, but I see one of the barriers is that your committee is not super knowledgeable about what we do. And one of the things that we accomplished prior to some of you guys who are here is that we came up with a mission statement. I mean, and I think that that really helps guide us now as to what our philosophy is. And I think that one of the major requirements for anybody that sits on this committee is read this mission statement. Do you believe in what this mission statement says? Because from what I have seen sitting here is that some of the people that have come and gone, and sometimes these people that were appointed only lasted 1 or 2 meetings, right? And they disappeared. So one of the barriers in having a counselor appoint each one of us is that what Thais said is who do you know?
Access, yeah.
Is who do you know? What are your connections with this particular counselor? And I will say that each one of us here, and this is pretty normal, we all have biases.
Oh, yeah.
We all have prejudices. And I know that for myself, I have had to work on that for forever. It's an ongoing thing, you know, that I make myself do. So if a particular counselor has a particular prejudice, a particular bias, a particular philosophy with DEI, he or she will appoint somebody who believes like him or her. And what that creates is that a lack of commitment to this committee's mission. So if a counselor, if I were the counselor appointing any of us, I would ask my appointee whether you are, what is your commitment to diversity? What is your knowledge of DEI? So you have to have some baseline knowledge of what diversity is. You don't have to be an expert,
Correct.
but you have to have some knowledge and commitment. Those are the, I would say commitment is a big one. So that would be just my input to the task that either a counselor has to achieve or the volunteer committee has to achieve. And I think that Stephanie kind of brought up something that I hadn't thought of that might be a good way to compromise. But I think that we need to go back to at least a statement from the person who is interested in being in this committee. So anyway, that's just my 2 cents.
Yeah. Yes, thank you. First off, I love the idea of giving, when we do develop a framework, giving that to new members so they have something to look over and understand and develop a baseline instead of having that be a prerequisite to even applying and becoming a part of the committee. And then as for what Carrie said, I don't think the beliefs and values of somebody necessarily dictates their commitment to this committee. The first member to ever turn over was a woman I love dearly. I was a sophomore and I was like, oh my God, she's amazing. She was supposed to host the first Pride Parade in Keizer before all that happened. She was also the first member to leave within a couple of months. So I don't believe because I've seen people less passionate about diversity stay longer, and I've seen people who are more passionate leave sooner. Like that, your commitment to our mission statement does not dictate your commitment to this committee.
So I'm going to bring a brainstorm, and I don't know if I'm going against rules or whatnot, but what if so as my term comes to an end, what if I bring 3 people or 4 people to this committee to vote as a suggestion? That could be one way, and then maybe there's also a way that they apply. Do we have to do? Is it one or the other, or is there a third way that we could?
It depends on how the committee was set up. No,
I just think that right now we'll just keep going on circles, and there's not going to be a perfect way to assign. I know that I didn't know anybody. No one at all. I came in and interviewed for another position, and
Councilor Reed.
no, someone else heard and said, hey, Councilor Reed, you might want to reach out to her. And she reached out to me. I've never met Councilor Reed before. I know she's a teacher. I sat with her, and we just talked about my knowledge, my background, and that's how I got here. So it's not necessarily who you know. It's really just I wanted to volunteer for the city of Keizer one way or another. And here are all my qualifications. I manage, I have diversity background based on my history. I have economics, so you find your way, and then you will find a place where you land that you are passionate. And I could be passionate about any of the things that I just mentioned with the city of Keizer. And if I wasn't here, I would be at another one, right? So it's not really like who you know, it's how you expose yourself and how you say, I want to volunteer. And then you'll find your way through. But I have never met any of them before, prior to this.
Going off of what Thais said, I really like that idea, although I don't know how plausible it is with rules and regulations and stuff. But I do know that Mayor Clark asked me to find new propositions for my next, I already have people in my head I'm working on. And so if we could maybe implement that into written word that we bring 2 or 3 people to the counselor who appointed us and give them a selection to choose from. I also had to write out an application. And the person who also interviewed for my spot, Angelica Sarmiento, she was the youth counselor. We both filled out applications and then was interviewed by Clark, and Reed approached us to fill out the applications. So I definitely think we should have some form of application process where we describe our thought process, or where they describe their thought process. I don't remember what questions I was asked by. I think one was what does diversity mean to me?
Perfect.
And then we give those to the counselors to give them an option to choose from, but where they're not the sole proprietor of who is getting chosen. Yeah. And having that in written.
And maybe if they come to you, can you send them to the counselor?
So what happens now? So before I get into that, I did have a question. Carrie, would you have come in front of the volunteer coordinating committee when they sent out their ask of how, to send a letter of interest, if it had involved coming in front of the dais, you wouldn't have done it?
Oh, I would have done it.
Okay.
It just didn't work that way.
Yeah, no. I know. So what normally happens with the volunteer coordinating committee is that the call goes out. We have this many positions open on such, and Dawn sends it out there's Facebook. It's on the website. Anything else? Email list. We are desperately trying to get youth input as to how to get, because all of the committees have youth positions available as well. And we all understand we're olds and we don't understand any of this.
I'm including myself in that group.
Right? So then the people come and they come up here and they sit right here and they give their little spiel. We ask questions and then we do a vote if necessary. We then recommend to the city council. And then they're the ones who actually do the appointing.
Okay.
It has happened in the past that the person that we recommended has not been accepted. It's not very common that that happens. Now, regardless of how it's not bylaws, what are they called for these committees?
The resolutions?
The resolutions, regardless of how the resolutions are written, I am absolutely positive, like for the like parks, if somebody wants to go off of parks and they have a couple friends and like, hey, there's going to be a position open, you should apply. They'll have to go through the same process. The danger with that, if you're only doing those, is you come back to it depends on who you know, and you're not getting new ideas and new voices in. I mean, that's the terrible thing about being inclusive, is that means being inclusive. So, but that's how the process goes. So the city councilors still have a say in it. Oftentimes they just go with what the volunteer coordinating committee has decided or has recommended. I mean,
I think so. We're not going to fix it or
No.
solve it tonight. So
No.
we're maybe we. I'll,
but I'm here.
No, and I
so-
love it, and I think it's not happenstance. I think it was meant for you to be here tonight. I will say, and we can talk about this, but maybe one consideration, and again, we're morphing it, is we do open it to all applications. If you found someone that you would recommend, maybe in their application, it said, "How did you hear about it?"
Yeah,
Friend,
and there's
or
also references.
Yep.
In the application, there's references.
Yep.
The application's also going to be revamped. This is also a plug because you guys were talking about going to the associations.
Yes.
All of the city committees are open to the public as well. So you can also sit in and you can see what we're all doing right and or wrong about, diversity and inclusion, and and that can help develop what you guys are going to want to present. Because Benita's right, you guys have to do you have to do motion, and you're here as for the city. And that's what the city committees are. And the city committees do a lot of the day-to-day processes. And I think it's really important for VCC because we're the ones who are recommending to all of the other committees. And so that's a place where we could inadvertently bottleneck diversity and inclusion.
Yeah.
And so it's really important to hey, you guys aren't asking about these questions, or you guys aren't looking at how this, weird experience might actually benefit. And, we don't know what we don't know. So that might be also another thing, is to assign for committees.
Thank you. I think we're getting close to ending today. But what I will say, because it's in the fabulous notes that Dawn takes, let's bring this as one of our first items next meeting. So Dawn, bear with me. This one, the community engagement model. So that's a homework. Review the documents that Tammy sent and pick out the things that you think could be applicable to here. So which framework, which outward, inward, frequency, and then let's start talking about what the equity lens may look like. So I know those are 3 big homeworks, but that's next meeting. Let's focus on it. And then when the community member reports, let's try to have everyone bring in what they heard in their community, in their neighborhood association. So I don't know Dawn, are you going to send the email and then we're going to decide which ones we go? Is that what, do we have time between now and, oh, and then there's another one. May 2nd, there's a big event happening, right? And we have a meeting that's, Councilor Starr had asked me to bring that up to see if we want to move the timing because I think there's a big event happening in City of Keizer that a few councilors are going to during the same time. Am I mistaken?
I don't know what that event
Hold
is.
on, let me see.
Also, at like 1 to 3 this weekend, I don't remember where, but there's a big protest against the library getting shut down. Not our library, the Salem Public Library that I think y'all should attend. I've seen it on social media. I'm going because I like the library, but y'all should go too.
Oh, goodness.
I think the May
The
2nd,
huge Keizer Chamber Percy event.
that may be it. I was thinking that it was a candidate forum, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, so we might want to talk about doing it a different time or the following Thursday.
Yeah, you actually can do it the following Thursday.
We can or can't?
You can, yes. The Volunteer Coordinating Committee meeting was canceled, so you can do it on the 9th.
The 9th. So let's go ahead and do that.
Okay.
I'll move to
Thank
have
you.
it the next week.
A second.
Perfect. So our next meeting isn't on May 2nd, it's on May 9th, because on May 2nd, there is a Keizer Chamber Percy event, which we probably should attend, but then we can't have a meeting and have the event at the same time. But, Don, will you please send us, and we can reply via email, right, which ones we want to attend, so we have at least one person in each of the neighborhood association, and then more than one if we can? Awesome, thank you. I'm sorry to give you so much homework tonight.
Also, was moved and seconded, so we got to do the I thing and slam your gavel.
Wait. I just want to remind people that tomorrow there is a exhibition and presentation.
Oh, that's right, at the Heritage.
Well, we have to I for the moving the day. This isn't adjourning the meeting.
All those in favor to moving our meeting date from May 2nd to
Oh,
May
I see.
9th, say
Aye.
Aye.
It has passed.
I see.
Thank you.
Okay, now you don't have to rush, Carrie.
Okay, just a reminder that there's going to be a presentation on the history of the Chinese in Salem. Wonderful. And it's at 6 p.m. tomorrow.
Tomorrow in here at the Keizer, at the higher.
Also a thing at 3 at the cemetery. Yeah, so there's that, and then, across the street there.
Yeah, at 6.
Russell Lowe, is that? Russell Lowe?
Yeah, So, Stephanie and I were wondering, are all of us doing a presentation on May 6th?
Only one with the same time frame. So the 5 minutes.
The 5 minutes, or the three of us?
Coordinate. Well, no, you can coordinate if you want it all. One take a minute and a half or so, or only one of you, but you all collaborate on the presentation.
Oh, we don't each get 5 minutes?
No.
Okay, I think Benito's scrambling to get out
Yes,
of here.
I know.
So
I have a-
I
I
moved
have
to
a kid
adjourn.
that I have to
moved to
get
get out.
All right. Meeting adjourned. Sorry it went long. We got a lot accomplished.